So I just finished arranging this, so let's finish mixing and mastering it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all my melodies, my 808s, and then all of my drums, which are over here. And we could take the tags too, but we don't have to, so I'm not going to. And then I'm going to put everything on what's called my pre-master chain. So I kind of do mastering in 2 different stages. You could probably get away with doing all of it in 1 stage. I just, for whatever reason, have it split into 2 different things. So we're going to finish this chain here, and then we'll move over to the master, and I'll put another preset on the master chain. So here's the pre-master chain. The first thing we have is an EQ, where I'm kind of cutting the low lows and the high highs, and then I'm also boosting the subs a little bit. Let's see if we want that, I guess. Okay, I think I want some more like mid-range on the snare, so I'm going to boost a little bit more. So the next thing in my pre-master chain is Maximus, and I have 3 different instances of Maximus here. And in each one I'm doing essentially the same thing. The differences will be where the bands are placed, and then also how much I'm actually compressing. So in this first instance, you'll see this note is up by the 9. In the second, it'll be closer to the 6. And the third, it'll be closer to the 3. And then on the master chain, I'll do it one more time, and it'll be flat, so we'll be limiting instead of compressing. Okay, so here's the first instance. The bands on the first instance of Maximus are kind of extreme. I've got 50 hertz and below for the low band, and then about 10K and above. And then everything in between is the middle band, obviously. So let's begin. So for the low band, so 50 hertz and below, I want to make sure I'm getting at least to this point here. So if you look at the top left or the bottom right, you can see it says negative 8.7 decibels. That's as loud as I want my low end. Well, I want to get my low end at least to that point. If I'm getting a lot, like super high above that point, I may turn it down a little bit, but this is kind of like my starting point. So let's see where it is. You can see I'm not quite getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the the volume into it just a little bit until I start compressing it. Okay. Another thing I like to do at this stage for the 50 hertz and below is I like to put a note about as low as you can put it, and then make that stuff a little bit quieter. So anything underneath this red line is going to get even quieter. And the reason for that is because you can hopefully see some of these little bits of residual sound that are kind of coming through. And I don't know exactly what that's from, but I probably don't want it because this is 50 hertz and below. And if it's 50 hertz and below, I basically just want it to be a kick, an 808, something that's meant to be down there. Anything else that's down there is probably not adding anything. Most likely, it's probably not, adding too much helpful information. I could be wrong. There may be cases where it is adding some useful information, but in this case, I don't think it is. And then I like to do kind of the opposite with the stuff that's louder. So anything above this red line, I'm going to actually expand. So I'm going to push this up. So I've kind of got like a little bit of an S-curve going on here. And then I'm not going to level match because I'm getting my low end where I want it to be right now. So I'm not going to worry about level matching. On the mid and the high bands, I am going to level match. So let's go to the mids. So I pushed up 1.8. Let's pull it back by 1.8. Let's go to the highs. Okay, so I don't need to level match the highs because I didn't push the volume at all or pull the volume back. Let's go to the master. I'm already compressing a little bit on the master, so I don't need to do too much. Okay, I want to get my main snare to be a little bit louder. My soft clipper and my limiter a little bit more. There we go. Okay, let's go to the next instance of Maximus, and I'm going to be doing the exact same thing. The difference will be, like I said before, the band placement. So you can see that my low band, the red band, isn't down by the 50 anymore. It's closer to 175. And then instead of being by the 10K, the high band has been brought up to the 5K, or around that. So I pushed up 1.3. Let's pull it back by 1.3. Let's go to the mids. So I pushed up 1.2. Let's pull it back by 1.2. Let's go to the highs. I'm okay with compressing the highs a little bit more than I am the other bands. And that's because most of the time I want my hi-hats to be the most dominant thing in the higher register, the higher range. And oftentimes my main snare and my main clap bleeds into the high range quite a bit. And so that's why I'm okay with compressing it more, because I want my hats to be the most prominent thing in the higher range. as opposed to something else like a clap, a snare, whatever. Let's go to the master. All right, let's go to the third instance of Maximus. Now, I'm going to do the exact same thing. The difference will be how I place my bands. Before I had pre-placed bands, so I knew where I wanted them ahead of time. For the third instance, though, I'm going to set them up manually. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my low band and just kind of pull it up until I don't really hear the 808 anymore as much, or the kick or whatever. And then I'll do the same thing for the high band until I can't really hear the hi-hats. So let's make these a little bit extreme so you can like actually hear what I'm talking about. So right now we're only hearing this middle band. So if I pull this up, we should stop hearing that 808 at some point, or at least hearing it as much. So we can still kind of hear it here, but it's not nearly as present. So let's do the same thing for the hi-hats. So we can pull them in pretty far. We don't want to go too skinny, but this is probably good enough. And then the process will be almost identical. So I pushed up by 1.2, let's pull it back by 1.2, go to the mids. Now if we set the mids up the way that we wanted it, the most prominent thing in this range right now should be that main snare or that main clap. And as you can see, it is. Okay, everything else is much, much quieter. There are some exceptions of some noise that's kind of coming in. So and I'm pretty sure that's an 808, so we can pull this down a little bit to kind of reduce the volume of that. It's fine. So let's do the same thing. Let's compress. And then I'm going to use the expansion function again. I'm going to make that main snare and anything else that happens to be in this range just a little bit louder. And then I'm going to go back and turn down those rims so that they aren't getting affected by that expansion as much. Up by 1.5. Let's pull it back by 1.5. Let's go to the highs. Okay, I don't need to level match because I didn't push any volume. Let's go to the master. Okay, I think I still want that main snare to be a little bit louder. Okay, so those are my first three instances of Maximus. The next couple of things in my chain are some patcher presets. So this one is for stereo separation. I'm taking the lows, putting them in mono, taking the highs, doing the opposite, separating them. And to kind of counteract that, I've already merged my main hats a little bit. And then the next patcher preset is a mid-side EQ. So I'm cutting the sub bass frequency from the sides, and then boosting the bass a little bit. And then on just the mids, I've got a limiter, as well as a little bit of saturation that's coming in for the louder stuff. And then another EQ for just the mids, and I'm doing kind of the same thing. I'm cutting the low lows and the high highs. Okay, and then the next thing we have is a wave shaper. So this is a hard clipper. I've got it set to a hard clipper. And sometimes I like to take the quieter stuff and just give them a little bit of a boost. I don't do it this much normally, but here, I'm going to do it before and after. So, I'm going to make it extreme so that we can really hear what this is doing. So that's normal. And then here's with it extreme. So that's obviously way too much, okay? So, but sometimes what I'll do is I will add just a little tiny bit of extra noise, distortion, volume, whatever you want to call it, to the quieter stuff. And sometimes doing that just a small amount to that quieter stuff can just help bring everything else up in the mix. Okay. The other thing I'm doing is I'm pushing 5 additional percentage volume into this hard clipper. And because I'm doing that, I'm hard clipping off some signal off the top, which means I can come over to a limiter and I can push about 0.3 decibels of volume. So if you look at the top left or the bottom right, you'll see 0.3 decibels I've pushed up. And when I hit play, you're going to see that we probably aren't going to be hitting that limiter at all. Okay, we might have hit it a little bit there at the very beginning, but other than that, we're pretty much not touching it. And we pushed an additional 0.3 decibels of volume, which is pretty cool. Okay, so that is it for the pre-master chain. The next thing I've got is my master chain. So let's come over here. Okay, so on the master chain, I've got an EQ, which is cutting the low lows. And then I have 2 compressors and a limiter. So both of these compressors are typically mixed out, almost either all the way mixed out or partially mixed out. This first compressor has the following settings. It's got like a slower attack. I might slow down the release a little bit. I've been doing a fast release, but let's make it slower. 3-to-1 ratio. The threshold is being brought down by 11 decibels, and then I'm pushing up the gain just a couple of decibels. And I'm going to turn off the second one for now. This is what it sounds like. Okay, sometimes I turn it all the way on. And in this case, I think I'm going to, because I like the way that sounds. Sometimes there's too much happening, like too much compression, or the track is already loud enough, and so turning this compressor all the way on is just going to make things sound worse and not better. I don't know if that's the case in this particular example. I think it sounds pretty decent with it mixed all the way on. Now this second compressor, if I have it on, which I don't always, it's almost always mixed out almost entirely. So right now it's on 9%, and that's probably about where I'll leave it if I have it on. The max I'll have this mixed in is like 15%, and the reason is because of the settings. So I've got 0 attack and a slow release. The ratio is the same as the other one, but then the threshold's being brought down by 30, and the gain's being cranked up by 20. So if this was mixed all the way on, and this is about to get really loud, so if you're wearing headphones, I would turn the volume down. If this is what it sounds like with this compressor mixed all the way on. Okay, so what you might be hearing is that what people call a pumping effect, or like I call it like a whooshing, like things are going in and out, in and out. And that's because you're compressing the entire signal down, and then when something that's making the whole signal loud goes away, the volume of everything else gets brought up to that level. So it sounds like things are getting louder and quieter really abruptly and aggressively, which is what's causing that like pumping effect. So this is obviously too much. However, if you mix this almost entirely out, you know, like 10% at most, you'll add just a small amount of that overcompressed signal in, and it can sound kind of good or cool. Now, if there's a ton of reverb in a track, I tend to not use this compressor at all, and I just turn it off completely, because you're also bringing up all those quieter sounds, which tend to be, you know, those reverb-y delay sounds, whatever you want to call it. So the next thing in my chain is another patcher preset where I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking my lows and putting them in mono a little bit, putting my highs in the separated field. I'm also doing kind of the same thing in the middle, but you can play with that to taste. And then we have a third instance of Maximus, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I did in the third case, where I'm going to solo the mid band, and then move these in until I don't hear the 808 or the hi-hats. Okay, and then the process will be basically the same. Oh, and here's what I was talking about earlier. Now I'm not compressing, I'm limiting. So before I was up by the 9, the 6, the 3, and now it's flat, okay? I pushed this up by 0.3, so I pulled it back by 0.3. Let's go to the mids. Push this up by 0.2, let's pull it back by 0.2. And then I'm going to do the expansion function again, just to kind of bring that main snare up just a little bit more. Go to the highs. Let's go to the master. Okay, so the next couple of things I have in my chain are a soft clipper, limiter, and a loudness meter. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the soft clipper and then look at my limiter and just kind of see like how much I think I can push into the soft clipper that's before it. Then we'll push into the soft clipper a bit, and then we're going to look at the loudness. Okay, so it looks like I might be able to push it about that far, 1.4. I'm not sure if that's an exact amount. So anytime I'm doing this, it's just giving me like a general starting point. Sometimes I push way more than this. Sometimes I pull it back. It really depends on the track. But I'm going to start with, and you can look in the top left corner, it says negative 1.4 decibels. Or you can look in the bottom right corner. It also says negative 1.4 decibels. So let's put this back to 0. And we're going to turn on the soft clipper. And then before the soft clipper, I'm going to push 1.4 decibels. So I'm going to the post, and I'm pushing 1.4 decibels. So it's going to be 1.4 decibels louder. It's going to go into the soft clipper, get soft clipped, and then we should see it here. Okay, looks fine. So now I'm going to use the Ulean loudness meter to tell me about how loud my track is and to make sure that I'm not getting above 0 decibels. If you notice that I'm using this tool incorrectly, or maybe I can just use it in a better way, feel free to let me know down in the comments, because I'm relatively new to using it. I do have like some base level understanding, but again, I'm not like an expert. Okay, let's push a little bit more volume. So I'm going to push 0.2 more. And then I'm also going to come up to these compressors and push just a little bit of volume into both. Not much. Okay, so I got a little bit above 0. So I'm going to drop the total volume down by 0.2 decibels to get me below 0. And then I might push a little bit more volume. So let's pull back by 0.2. And then let's go before that and let's push a little bit of volume. So let's go back to Maximus. Let's push a little bit more. And I'm going to do the same thing with the compressors and just push a little bit more. So I think we have everything where we want it. I never got above 0 here, and that looked about where I wanted it. So if you have any questions about any part of this process, feel free to throw them in the comments. Also, again, if you notice that I'm using a tool incorrectly, or maybe I can use it better, for example, the Ulean loudness meter, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm relatively new to using this sort of thing, and I'm still trying to, kind of figure it out. But yeah, so like I said, if you have questions about any part of the process or anything, feel free to throw it in the comments. Or if you have suggestions for a future video, feel free to throw that in the comments. But yeah, let's listen back to it.